since it's posted, and say, you know, for the next X minutes, I'm going to allow us, unless I have objection, to have 3.5 combined with 2.1 so that we can interact with the folks.
Okay.
But we're going to limit it to this time until so that we can finish our work session and then everything else. And if we have any more time, then we can come back to that.
Okay. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and call this meeting of the City of Lubbock Board of Health to order. I'm pleased that everybody could be here, both in our colleagues on the board as well as the public, because we had to move from Friday to today. So I know that may have been somewhat of a disruption, but it's always good that people are flexible. What I'd like to do is go ahead, and since we have 6 speakers here, and then I don't know how many we have signed up. Tracy, did we get, no, nobody signed? Okay, so we have 6 speakers. And what I'd like to do is take an item out of order and take 3.5, discussion of the health effects on hydraulic fracking, and move it up and consider it at the same time that we invite the public speakers who have signed up, so that we can expedite things and bring them together. Do I hear, is everybody okay with that? Just go ahead and take it out of order and let's do 3.5 and go ahead and have the speakers. Okay. Then what we'll do is that each of the 6 that we have listed here, because you registered before the meeting, you'll be able to interact with the board. And so as the board has questions, we'll take those. And then what we'll do is Dr. Reed also has a presentation on the health effects of fracking. So we'll just kind of see how it goes, maybe give you guys the 3 minutes. And then if we have some specific questions, but what we might do is then move on and let Dr. Reed give his program. And then as time allows, we'll come back and have more of an interaction, but we'll see how it goes. So if I can start off with 2.1, Armando Gonzalez wants to discuss before the board the health effects of oil and natural gas hydraulic fracturing. So Mr. Gonzalez, if you'll come forward and take the microphone. And you'll have 3 minutes. And Tracy.
Mr. Gonzalez, here is a timer that
cool.
You can see this round circle going away as your time is diminishing. So I'll just start that, please.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
I'd like to thank the City of Lubbock Board of Health for allowing us to gather and speak with you here today. We sincerely appreciate those that have looked into the matter of fracking and its effects. About 2 weeks ago, our group went directly to the families that live in Yellow House Canyon. Yellow House Canyon residents live within 1 mile or closer to the proposed 4-7's exploration drilling well. Every person we spoke with there was outraged that the City of Lubbock would enter into a contract that could pose health risks to their small community. Many said that already they have trouble with air quality because of the nearby feedlot, the compress, and many of them exasperatingly said, and now they want to put carcinogens into the air. The community there is ready for action against fracking, and we as a group will visit more communities in the near future. Fracking is loud and noisy and constant and abusive to the people's senses. It's an ongoing process. It's 24/7. And our right to peace and quiet should not have been signed away by the City of Lubbock. In the City of Lubbock Health Department's codes, there are thousands of rules and regulations concerning eating and dining establishments, restaurants. The city scrutinizes every single detail about how food is prepared and served and properly kept. You do this for good reasons. Please apply this same standard to the fracking industry, the industry that uses hundreds of chemicals that are known carcinogens in their operations. Many times they are used aloofly and negligently. If the food industry is highly scrutinized, even about the temperatures that they use and cross-contamination, how can the fracking industry not be scrutinized when they use volatile organic compounds in every process of their operation? In the contract between the City of Lubbock and 4-7's, there's no mention about how many tanks will be held.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry?
30 seconds.
Oh, there's no mention about how the city of Lubbock or 4/7s will prevent contamination of the air or the water. This contract may be good enough for a private citizen or a private agreement between a farmer or a private individual and an exploration company. But I think that as the city of Lubbock, that we need a better contract, because a contract of this sort is between the citizens of Lubbock and 4/7s. We need a more detailed contract because it represents so many people. It's on public land. I'm sorry for going over.
Questions from the board?
Can we ask questions?
Yes. Go ahead. Okay. As I said, Mr. Gonzalez, what we'll do is probably let the speakers go, and then I think we'll have plenty of time. And then we'll have the interaction, so I appreciate your comments, and,
Thank you very much.
and we'll give you another opportunity, sir. And then we have 2.2. Naida Gonzalez will appear before the Board of Health to also discuss the health effects of oil and natural gas hydraulic fracturing. Go ahead, ma'am. You'll have 3 minutes.
Hey, good afternoon, members of the board. Nice to be with you on such a lovely day, beautiful weather. I'd like to go over some basic toxicology. A lot of you I know don't need that, but for the benefit of some of the people that are here. Fracking is a very unconventional method of gas drilling. It emits volatile organic compounds, VOCs as they are called in the industry, and they are introduced to the human body via the skin or absorption. You can breathe them or inhale them, and the most common method is the respiratory system. Now, during an emission event, you could have a short exposure. We're talking about first responders, people in the healthcare industry. They're usually exposed in very short intervals, which is reversible. But a chronic exposure that is repeated and sustained, we're talking about in the terms of months or years, is usually irreversible. I, ladies and gentlemen, am in the sacrifice zone, being upwind and downwind from several proposed city-owned fracking pad sites or gas wells. Let's discuss the city sewer farm. 4/7 leased it to extract from underneath the sewer farm. Really? Do they pay $2.19 million to the city? Exactly $1.03 million went to the wastewater department, $433,139 to the solid waste department, $729,915 to the airport. Let me see. Why, gentlemen and ladies, do you think that they would pay the largest amount to the wastewater disposal? Could the city be engaging in the process of not just exploring for shale gas, but could it also be involved or allowing 4/7s to use the sewer farm, as they call it, as an injection site? An injection site would subject the residents, and I would be at ground zero, to earthquakes and seismic activity. And besides that, we would be subject to the flares and all of the other hazards that go with the pad sites. After all, where are they going to dispose of the millions of gallons of toxic, radioactive, and I mean radioactive, sometimes it's normal, they call it normally occurring radioactive minerals, sometimes come up with the frack water, and some of those minerals do come up naturally, but a lot of those minerals will have to be disposed of, and we're talking about millions of gallons of toxic, radioactive produced fracking water or flowback. Historically, in many instances, when the industry leases a landfill or a sewage treatment plant, there is so little oversight and regulation of the industry that it easily becomes an injection site for millions and millions of gallons of toxic wastewater. The oil and gas industry watchdogs, TECQ and Texas Railroad Commission, have become nothing more than a lapdog, not the watchdog, and even boast about the relationship with big oil and gas and their roles as promoters and facilitators. You health board members are charged with the unique and important task of protecting the public health and well-being. With the task, you as physicians and healthcare professionals have an ethical and a moral obligation to do all that you can and that is in your power to ensure the city of Lubbock, if it doesn't go ahead with fracking, protects the residents of the city and the county.
All right. Questions? Dr. May?
Comment and a question. One, you mentioned fracking is relatively new. It's been going on in Texas for over 60 years.
To the Barnett Shale has seen most of the fracking since 2005. It's a process that was developed in the 40s, but it wasn't used, it wasn't as prevalent as it is now because it's so cheap to extract the shale gas. But in that cheap extraction, you have a lot of damage to the environment, a lot of damage to the surface land, and a lot of damage to the water table.
I haven't seen any federal reports that would substantiate anything you've said. The EPA is regulating all of this. You mentioned volatile organic compounds. What other than natural gas are you referring to?
Well, we're talking about methane, we're talking about benzene, we're talking about toluene, we're talking about radium that is in the dust that travels with the trucks and in the mud pits. Whenever it dries, the radium becomes airborne and it becomes a volatile organic compound that you can absorb through the skin and most likely inhale. And it stays in your lung. Radium settles at the bottom of your lungs and it does not come out. It causes cancer.
The federal government hasn't found any radioactive contaminant. In fact, they've made the statement that there's virtually no radioactivity in this water and that the greatest exposure for people are their granite countertops in their kitchen.
Sir, if you will do a little research, NORM, the NORM stands for naturally occurring radioactive materials, and they are very prevalent at 13 or 15 or 18,000 feet underground. They come up with the frack water.
Prevalent in the room. If we had a detector, we'd be getting.
Well, and radium actually, when it turns into a gas, becomes radon, and that is a carcinogen, a lung carcinogen. And when it's naturally occurring, it comes back with a flowback water. And this would expose the workers at the sewer farm and all of the other facilities, the landfill, to unnecessary exposure to radioactive material. And that has been a known fact that a lot of the water that has been tested for radioactivity sets off the Geiger counter.
This would set off the Geiger counter too.
Other questions?
It sets it off at a much higher rate than that water would, I believe.
Dr. Epstein?
I have here a material I printed off today from the EPA website, which says there have been well-documented air quality impacts in areas with active natural gas development, with increases in emissions of methane, volatile organic compounds, and hazardous air pollutants.
That's all natural gas. Methane is a part of natural gas.
Yeah, methane is, but volatile organic compounds and hazardous air pollutants.
Carbon dioxide is considered by the EPA hazardous air pollutant.
Any other questions from the board? Seeing none, Ms. Gonzalez, we'll give you another opportunity. Thank you very much. Leanne Lamb-Vines will appear before the Board of Health to discuss the health effects of oil and natural gas hydraulic fracking.
Hi, thank you all. Last year, the existence of Lubbock's Department of Health was threatened. But the citizens of Lubbock came together with your support and saved our health department. What a telling victory about the power citizens of Lubbock have when we know we are being faced with dire health consequences because of misguided actions on the part of our city government. Jobs. Fracking can provide jobs. That is not in question. But the question is, what is a job when it destroys our health and the health of our community? Several of you have looked into the negative health implications of fracking, the chemicals involved that produce deeper water that is naturally contaminated with dangerous substances, the contamination of aquifers, not to mention the downright destruction of fresh water sources that are vital to life on Earth, our life, and many, many more potential problems with fracking that can affect the health of our citizens. We know that the jobs fracking will create will never be a balance to the destruction that fracking is inherently capable of. However, there are many technologies now available for producing clean energy, but we see the foot dragging of policymakers when it comes to implementing the needed infrastructure and the needed policies to get these clean technologies online and productive in our area. These technologies do not have the health destruction qualities that the carbon energy industry has had, and it has become greater and greater as the sources for such energy have become more difficult to reach. These problems will only get worse in the future. I ask you board members to join us, the citizens of Lubbock and the Lubbock area, to implore the City Council to take the necessary steps now to stop farther action on the illegitimate contract signed to allow fracking on city property. Also join us in pushing forward for policies that facilitate the implementation of clean, healthy, and local energy production. Clean energy production also will create jobs, and those are good, healthy jobs. And I say illegitimate because that contract was signed just a few days after I saw any public notice of it. It did not give public input a chance.
Any questions from the board? Dr. Mack?
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. I'd like to read something to you here. This is from the EPA Administrator, Lisa Jackson, stated before a U.S. House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, and I quote, "I am not aware of any proven case where fracking process itself has affected water quality. 3 of those investigations in Texas, Wyoming, and Pennsylvania thus far, EPA has found no evidence of contamination. In a case in Wyoming, the EPA published faulty data and speculative information."
Okay, I've seen lots of reports from Cornell University and other universities that show that's not true anymore.
Well,
maybe she didn't have it at the time.
What year was that done?
It's been seen.
This was May 2011 was a public hearing. We have a problem in science and medicine. They have become politicized. A lot of what we hear coming out of universities is not scientific.
I'm sorry, I disagree with you on that one.
Well,
I think that if it's not scientists that are going to come up with the evidence and scrutinize it, then nobody else is, and that leaves us totally free.
But we have a lot of scientists that are politicized, and we're getting false information.
Okay.
I wonder on the source of some of these. The Heritage Foundation is not a scientific publisher, but rather a portrayer of certain points of view. So I don't see that as a real scientific source.
Didn't present it as a scientific source. The EPA I'm quoting, that's not a scientific organization. Okay.
I'll present some scientific sources.
Okay. Any other questions from the board for our speaker? Okay. Thank you very much. Mark Lawson will appear before the board. Mark's not here? Okay. All right. And here we have Charles and Joe Canaster. They're not here either. Okay. And Karen Porter. There's Karen is here. Very good. Will appear before the Board of Health to discuss the health effects of oil and natural gas hydraulic fracturing.
Okay. First off, I hate speaking in public, so forgive me while I stumble through this. I do want to thank you for your time and for your service to our community. My main really concern with fracking is the water use. There are 20 sites being considered for drilling on city land. At each site, it's one pad. The drilling company can put up to 8 wells on each pad. That's 160 wells at 5 million gallons of water per well. It's a total of 800 million gallons of water. It's about what the city uses in 1 month. However, unlike water used for human consumption in agriculture, this water is removed from the water cycle permanently. We do not have the ability to make it usable again. My concern is that once this type of drilling has begun in the area, it will not stop. Forest Service Drilling has leased 6,200 acres of land, 300 wells, 1.5 billion gallons of water, 500 wells, 2.5 billion gallons. This is assuming that each well will only be fracked once. It is sometimes possible to refracture a well several times. You may doubt that we will ever have that many wells in our area, but take a look at a satellite map of the Midland, Odessa, Gardendale area, or the Denver City area. For miles, all you see is little roads and little square pads everywhere. Fort Worth has over 1,000 wells within the city limits. Fresh water supplies in our state are already stressed. We do not need to stress them further. Also, the water contamination. This is an excerpt from the article Public Health Concerns of Shale Gas Development on the Physicians for Social Responsibility website. A hydraulic fracturing of shale occurs deep underground, and although there are some legitimate concerns that this may cause direct problems through the propagation of cracks, events closer to the surface provide clearly demonstrated pathways of exposure. Water contamination can occur in a variety of circumstances, such as transportation spills of fluids and produced waters, well casing leaks through fractured rock, drilling site discharge, and wastewater disposal. Drilling chemicals and fracturing fluids used in various steps of the drilling process can be highly toxic and include known carcinogens, benzene, butoxyethanol, boric acid, methanol, other stuff I can't say. Endocrine disrupting chemicals are also present in significant amounts. Flowback water withdrawn from the well after the fracturing process and produced water returned to the surface with the natural gas introduce other toxic substances in addition to the toxins put into the ground. These returned waters contain heavy metals, lead and arsenic, naturally occurring radioactive materials, radon, uranium, chromium, bromide, and chloride. Containment of these returned waters remains a problem, and recycling or reuse for other drilling operations account for only a portion of these toxic fluids. Flowback and produced waters are often put in evaporation ponds, which have been known to leak, contaminating water and soil and leading to documented instances of fish and livestock deaths. In some part of the country, wastes are injected into abandoned conventional gas wells or underground storage facilities.
Okay. Time.
I just have a...
Okay, go ahead.
Fracking may use or produce a small amount of these chemicals per well, but we are putting a small amount in a huge number of places. So that adds up. What are the immediate effects of exposure? More importantly, what are the long-term and cumulative effects to land, water, humans, and animals? I believe that the measures taken to protect our health and water during the process of drilling and wastewater disposal are grossly insufficient. Lack of strong regulation, fast-developing technology, and insufficient manpower to oversee operations have left us running behind, reacting to problems instead of proactively preventing them. Again, our water resources are under pressure, not just here, but worldwide. We need to be concentrating on using less water, not more, and on using and developing cleaner and safer forms of energy production. Without a doubt, a cleaner city is a healthier city.
Okay. Questions, comments from the board? Dr. May?
I want to comment that none of the water using this fracking is being sold by the city of Lubbock.
I understand that. In the contract, it says that we cannot use the water on the leased property. I'm not sure if that means you can't use the water that's under the property. Can you get it from the property next door? I don't know. Also, that water is going to come from somewhere. If it's not our water, it's going to be somebody's water. All water is connected.
Other questions? Seeing none?
Also a list of articles and reports on here, but I only made 10 copies of my
Okay, that's fine.
I can email them to everyone. I don't know where to find all your email addresses.
If you can send it to probably Bridget, and you can get, or Becky, to cover that. And I would make a comment that to give an idea of what I see as sort of a timeline here is today we're certainly pleased to get a discussion going. And I can see probably at the next Board of Health meeting, out of all the discussion here, that we would be likely to be moving toward drafting the resolution that we would pass forward to the City Council. So between now and then, as people have citations, information, I would certainly encourage them, those to be distributed to us to help us as we move toward trying to draft, because at this point we have no action item on this. It's merely for discussion, but we appreciate your time. Okay? All right. Why don't we go ahead and move to Dr. Reed and let him give our...
Okay, I think I can give it for here, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Use my mic. Okay, we move to the first slide, or the next slide. Okay, this, because there's been a lot of discussion so far about the scientific underpinnings of this, I felt it was necessary to present the science that has been carried out. And this is in peer-reviewed, very acceptable journal, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, one of the 3 top journals, science journals in the United States. This occurred in 2011. Discusses methane contamination of drinking water. Now, I'm just going to discuss the water itself. I'm not discussing air today. Have the next slide. This was carried out in Pennsylvania, where there's a lot of fracking fields, and they're looking at water sites. These are the drinking water sites near an active. That's the active well there. And what they did was, on the next slide, you can see the structure of the subsurface materials. And this is the material here, the Marcellus organic rich shale, which is where they're fracking. And you can see they have limestone over sort of caps on top of this, somewhat similar, but not quite the same as what we have here in Lubbock. Next slide. Now this is a key slide because there's a lot of talk about the fact that by putting proper casings and doing this in a proper manner, you don't have leakage from these wells into the surrounding water supply. And so what they looked at here was they looked at the distance from the well and the amount of methane, this is methane in this case, that's leaking into the water supply, and what you see is right around the well, it goes way up. So there's a lot of leakage into these wells that are nearby, near this fracking site. So this dispels the idea that you don't have leakage from these wells into the water nearby. On the next slide, what they did was, well, this just says that ethane and other hydrocarbons, higher hydrocarbons, are found in 21 out of 26 drinking wells in the active sites. The next slide. Now this is an interesting study where they wanted to make sure that this methane that they're looking at is not being produced by bacteria. And so what they did was, you can look at the isotope values or C13 values of the material, and if it was being produced by, let's look at this first graph, if it was being produced by microbiological sources, we would see indications of this type of methane here. But here the highest concentrations are over here in what's called the geothermal site. This is coming from old, decayed material that's very ancient. And so this is actually this methane is coming from the fracking site and not coming from any microbes or anything else that would be producing methane. Down here we're looking at the ratio of methane to higher hydrocarbon chains and versus the C13. And you can see that all this is coming down here in the geothermal part and not again from any microbes that are present. Now we're going to shift gears a little bit on the next slide. Again, another paper, this is more recent. This came out July 24th of this year. Again from the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And this one, what we're looking at is evidence for natural migration of this brine. So this is showing what can happen from the material, the water, for instance, they're pumping down there. They're just measuring indications that moving through this fracturing site, this material can get up into shallow aquifers, which is what we worry about around Lubbock. On the next slide, this is their conclusion. I can actually go through this in much more detail with the board if we want to, because this is a long article. But basically, this is the conclusion. The coincidence of elevated salinity in the shallow groundwater with a geochemical signature, similar to that produced by water from this Marcellus formation, suggests that these areas could be at greater risk of contamination from shale gas development because of the pre-existing network of cross-formational pathways that enhance hydraulic connectivity to deeper geological formations. In other words, the material from the fracking site can move up into the groundwater of this site. Now, the next slide, this is a more controversial, and actually Dr. Carr sent out a little blurb about this particular release. This was a fact-finding thing, instead of fact-based regulation for environmental protection of shale gas development, done right here in Texas by the Energy Institute. And the controversial part was that one of the main authors on this had received $1 million from the oil company, or the gas company. However, what I wanted to read to you was some interesting things in this site. So even though this person was more biased, perhaps, we don't know, there was a conflict of interest here, certainly. This is what actually was said. I thought this was interesting because although there has been considerable controversy over hydraulic fracking, fluid additives, and their potential impact on water supplies, the potential risk of naturally occurring contaminants like arsenic in flowback and produced water is also a major concern. And they go on, and this is a 440-page report. The potential risk from fracturing fluid additives in flowback water is smaller than that of naturally occurring contaminants such as arsenic. So they're worried more about arsenic. And the reason I sort of said about arsenic at this time is because In Bangladesh, the UNESCO drilled a bunch of wells because the people in Bangladesh were getting their water from groundwater, just on top of the surface water. And the problem with this, of course, was a lot of pollution, a lot of contamination. So they thought this was doing a great service for the people of Bangladesh to have these wells. And people were very happy. They had these nice wells going down to the ground. But what they found out about 14 years later was that there was a lot of arsenic coming up from this deep water source into their drinking water. And these children, massive numbers of children, in Bangladesh now are suffering from all kinds of deformities due to the arsenic in the water. And so this takes a long time to develop, and we do have arsenic below surface here. So, and there's more than just arsenic. There's also, of course, selenium. There's also, of course, radioactive compounds and chromium and other compounds or other elements that could get into the water supply. So, and yet we don't have, at the moment, anything written into our contract to do any kind of assays for this. It took them 14 years to realize this was happening in Bangladesh. Next slide. I don't know if I have any. I think that's it. Okay. So what I wanted to show here was from scientific studies on this, that there definitely is a correlation between the release of this material from these fracking wells into the surrounding water supplies. And it's not a simple process. We don't have, sadly, we don't have the data yet on these other things. We do have a lot of selenium, for instance, in the soil here in West Texas. This is why selenium comes up through the soil into plants. This is why loco weed is so toxic. It's a selenium accumulator. And so we wouldn't want to start pumping up, having selenium come up from way down below into our water supplies. So again, as Dr. Carr just said, this is more of a case of we want to gather data to talk about this. And I would think that in the next month or so, we would want to look carefully at these contracts. I tried to read these contracts, and I'll tell you, I got so confused with these city contracts, trying to figure out which contract was the contract and what it really covered. Hopefully within the next month, maybe I can learn what the actual contract is and what it covers and what it doesn't cover and how long it is. Because I would think that if nothing else, the Board of Health would want to have a sort of cautionary note as to what we're doing and not sort of rushing into this precipitously without a lot of good information.
Okay.
And that's more or less my presentation.
Okay. Any comments at this time? Okay, because I do want to give adequate time for this discussion. If we could go ahead and let's. All right, go ahead, Dr. May.
Ted, I presume that you're talking about the Dimock, Pennsylvania scare that came out. Yes.
I don't know anything about Dimock scare. This is all I read is
Dimock, Pennsylvania. And what the EPA found in that was that all naturally occurring leaks of methane, normal occurring methane, normal occurring natural gas. In Pennsylvania, very much like the area where I farm in Illinois, when we drill wells, we often hit gas deposits. Many people in my farming area have powered their homes for 50 to 60 years on the natural gas that comes out of the wells that they drilled for water. Many of the homes in our area have a taste of natural gas. This is just naturally occurring in areas where you have coal. Now, the EPA looked at this. They came out in December. They sent a letter to those people who you were concerned about on December 2nd, telling them that they found nothing that presents an immediate health hazard. They're going to continue to monitor it. And this came from Trish Taylor, Community Involvement Coordinator, Hazardous Site Cleanup Division, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And I can give you her phone number. Anybody can certainly welcome to call her, 215-814-5539. There's also a David Polish, Community Involvement Coordinator with the state of Pennsylvania, and his number is 215-814-3327. And they said we can call these numbers if anybody has any concerns. But basically, the hearings showed that these were not an area of concern. These were all naturally occurring, naturally leaking gas into these areas.
Can I answer that?
Go ahead.
Okay, really my point was not the latter point which you raised, which was whether or not natural gas is a health hazard for them. I was making 2 points. Number one, first of all, this is not just natural gas in the soil. That was what the first slide, the data slide showed. First, that there was correlation. They found correlations between the distance from the well and the amount of material coming out. So this is coming from those wells. It's not coming from just there in the soil.
It's shown to be natural leak, Ted.
Why did it correlate with the wells? That's the whole point. And number two, this is not just gas there in the soil. This is ancient gas. It's coming up from down, way down below.
There's no
the
natural gas in
geological
soil. There's no natural gas in soil other than methane that comes out.
So this is gas that correlates with these wells. And that was what the whole study was about. And the point is that the well itself is producing a perturbation in the system that allows these materials to come up. And the same thing was shown in the second study, which is this year, where what you have is material coming from the fracturing sites itself up into the drinking water. Now, it didn't say it was hazardous. It just showed that it could come from that material up into the drinking water from the fracturing sites. This is along the fracturing sites. So, and it came from the water that they pumped down into the well. That was what they were showing. So they were showing that the water that was pumped down into the well was moving through the fracturing site and coming up into the drinking water. And that was what that data showed. Those two separate studies. Now, the point is, I mean, the EPA can say, wow, this doesn't say it's dangerous. The point of this whole paper is the fact that this shows what can happen and where it can come from. Now, whether the EPA looked for arsenic or anything else in those wells, in that drinking water, that, I don't know. Did they look for that?
EPA apparently is monitoring because there's considerable concern.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody is contesting the fact that we don't want things in our drinking water. I may be a conservative, but I want clean drinking water, I want clean air, I want good health, I want good things, I want good food, okay? I don't
Why
think that's
consider this all a conservative stand? I'm being very conservative about this.
But Ted, the results that I've seen that have come out of the EPA is they've debunked that study and said these are all naturally occurring.
Wait a minute. This is July of this year. They've already debunked the study from July of this year in the National Academy of Sciences.
Wait. You only showed one study. That was 2011.
Two studies.
Okay.
Two separate studies. One was December last year. One was July of this year.
All I'm aware of, there's no evidence coming out of the EPA that any of this has occurred due to fracking.
I can only present the scientific data.
Well, as you know, I'm highly skeptical of a lot of scientific data that comes out, particularly about global warming and fracking.
Well, all we can say is when it comes out in one of the most prestigious journals in the United States,
no one to be far left in its opinion.
I don't think we need to bring politics into this matter.
All
I think what we're talking about is
all politicized.
I think what we're doing is trying to have a conservative stand on protecting the drinking water of the people of Lubbock. That's all we're talking about.
All right, for the sake of time, because I do want to get back to this, but if we can just get some of these other items, let's blow through those. And so if the pleasure is, let's move quickly through it and keep our remarks very succinct. 3.1, Communications Disease Report. Becky.
Okay, our disease report this month, the enteric diseases were lower than they have been, which is good news. We do have West Nile cases. I reported that last month. Since I have done this report, we have one more case that has been confirmed of a neuroinvasive disease. So we have 6 of those, 2 West Nile fevers, and everybody that we have interviewed is recovering nicely. So that's good.
All right.
Other than that, things are as usual. I just want to remind everybody, get your flu shot.
All right.
Question, aren't our West Nile cases going down? There's a graph on this public health preparedness report. Are West Nile virus cases going down in the state? Is that the situation?
The last message I got from Dr. Alexander up in Kenyon was that they were starting to see a downward trend slightly, but they were going to wait with the recent rains to see what happens.
Are we going to get a report on the spraying or larvicide?
That's next on the agenda.
All right.
No, but I'm doing.
Anything else?
No,
Nope.
that's all. Thank you.
And then Glenn's not here. We're going to present, or can people just reference the paper?
I will just give a few points.
Okay.
And note that in your packet is Glenn's information that he was going to present. Basically, it boils down to this year, of course, as we all know, there's been little rainfall, and so the mosquito population has been reduced compared to years past. However, that does not mean that there aren't mosquitoes, and fall is when West Nile starts showing its ugly head. So please, the best thing anybody can do is to drain standing water so that those mosquitoes aren't able to breed. So if you know anyone who has flower pots with water in them, please have those drained. That's the most important thing you can do. Vector control is responding to complaints both in the city and in the county, and they have really been concentrating on fly complaints, and so they've been also spraying dumpsters for flies.
All right. Anything else?
That's it.
All right. How about let's move on to Health Department relocation.
It's coming along really, really well. They are wrapping the building up, and hopefully they will be finished on Friday, but we'll have to, all the inspectors will have to come in and look at their work and sign off on that. So we expect to be moving by the next Board of Health meeting for sure.
All right. Update on pound to person. We're getting there. 3.6, discussion of future Board of Health meetings, locations, and time.
My kind of report.
That's right, succinct. Future Board of Health meetings, locations, and time. Check back. Okay? Now, let's go back then to further discussion on...
or do you want to take...
next month?
We have action. Can I have approval for the August 17th, 2012 meeting minutes?
Move.
Dr. Epstein?
Second.
Ms. Hinges? Okay, so it's been approved.
All in favor.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, all opposed? Boom, done. Okay, and that was our one action item. Now let's go back and continue this discussion. I would just note that I circulated to the board just some looking over some of the materials, the contracts, et cetera. I agree with Dr. Reed that I'm not a contract law attorney. There's a lot of legalese in there. There did seem to me to be some issues that I'll be happy to share with the public, and we can get this on there. But it seems to me that the three recommendations, which I'll just put out there for the public's benefit to hear, was one, I thought, the Texas Railroad Commission, because a lot of the contracts talk about going with federal and state guidelines, that ultimately it would seem like to change the Railroad Commission standards and guidelines would be useful. That would possibly prove to be quite daunting at this point. The second option I saw was that if we were to approach the City Council and leadership with even going over above and beyond what the Texas Railroad Commission has and set some higher standards, again, while that's a possibility that they might do that, I also see that as a rather arduous process. The third option that I saw was that certainly for us to ensure and ask our leadership to ensure that compliance takes place, that it wasn't clear to me in the contracts as to exactly who monitors this, and with some of the city manager and other people being here, perhaps they can address that. But, who's checking the people at the drilling site to make sure they're following the standards with wastewater disposal, with like, for example, I saw all the contracts say that they're going to do water quality checks at the point of drilling and like 1 year later and 1 year thereafter. And I'm not up enough to know if that's the standard for water checking, but it seems to me to wait 12 months is a little bit long. So I think we need to be cooperative in the process of trying to give counsel to the city government as to how to approach this. But Ms. Dunball, do you know, for example, like in the monitoring process, in terms of, is it entirely by self-report, or do we just have people that go out and confirm what 4.7 tells us?
I'm sorry, I don't have any additional information on that point. We could sure research it for you. The contracts were developed by outside oil and gas attorney, and I probably need to refer back to him to get really good information for the board, and we'll do that for you.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about that?
Go ahead.
Can we, in the next couple of weeks, can we get the actual testing that's done, or the standards that are set by the Railroad Commission and the EPA for what they look at and what they actually test for. And then sort of addressing your second, your point there about whether we can go beyond. I don't think there's anything wrong with us recommending, for instance, that if they don't have trace metal analysis in their standards, we can ask for that. Because I think as a local board, we certainly have, well, at least the city council certainly has the right to ask for analysis of those materials in drinking water, even if they're not part of the EPA or the state standards, because they should be. And these are things that we should be looking at.
Okay. Ms. Hinges?
I would like to see us bring somebody from petroleum engineering and use the resources that we have here at the university and see if we couldn't see whether within that department there are people who are interested in fracking and pick their brains, because I think this would be a wonderful source for us and we should be using it.
Now, are we allowed, can I ask the council, can we set up a meeting for sort of information like Kay was asking about outside, so we can at least get this before we come back for a monthly meeting, and so we don't waste everyone's time. At least we can sit around and find out as a group.
As a board, if you post the meeting, you can have a meeting, special call meeting.
But does it have to be an open meeting? Do we have to, for just background, we can just sit there and listen?
Yeah, if you're going to post it, it's going to be open.
We have to do it.
Well, but maybe the simpler thing would be, as long as we have less than a quorum.
Well, there may be a quorum there.
Well, but it may be more valuable to not have a quorum just so that we can have a fact-finding.
I would caution you that if you're not going to have a quorum, but then everybody's going to talk about it, that's quorum.
Okay. Okay. All right. So yeah. All right, so let's see about getting a meeting set up and.
So we can just go through one thing, getting information about this from people in the area.
And what standards they would like to see enacted, whether they are now or not, because I think we can go the step further if we have the good information.
Public comment about that?
I think Dr. Reed makes an excellent suggestion. In many cases where there has been contamination of the water table and wells on people's property, there was no preliminary testing before the fracturing process, so they had no way of proving in a court of law that there was actual damage because they did not have anything to go by. No preliminary testing that would indicate that those pollutants weren't there before the fracturing process.
Do any members of the board know anybody over at Petroleum Engineering?
I can find out.
Okay. Would you please to kind of identify a person, and then what I'd suggest is maybe in 2 weeks' time, let's post a meeting so that would give us 1 week. So if you can find somebody in 1 week so that we can post a meeting for 2 weeks. Okay. Mr. Gonzalez?
I would like to suggest that we request other experts from other areas as well, maybe even out of the state, because as a report that I have here in my hand, an article by Terrence Henry and Dr. Reed mentioned him, Dr. Grote, who works for the University of Texas and was doing a study, was found that he had millions of dollars in benefits and money coming from the oil industry. So as a member of the public, I would like a neutral person, expert, to come and study this, because I have seen some of the reports from the Texas Tech Petroleum Department, and they seem very biased and one-sided. And I would suggest respectfully that you ask for a person outside of the area, and from the Marcellus project, from the Wyoming project, especially to come and give a detailed study about this, but outside of the area. And I would also want to find out if Dr. May has ever received any benefit or monies from oil, natural gas, and or investments there as such?
Oh, absolutely. Every time the price of gas and oil comes down, I benefit because it greatly saves me money on my farm, my transportation, and so forth.
Well, I'm talking about direct money from oil companies, maybe on some of your farms or anywhere?
I'm simply in favor of producing cheap, inexpensive energy so the poor people of this country can have clean water, good food, good transportation, and so the poor people of the world. The higher the cost of energy in the world, the less people who can afford.
Well, I don't need a lecture about the economy of natural gas or oil. I just want to know if you have had monies from oil companies or natural gas companies given to you or benefits.
Nobody's given me any money for anything.
So, Mr. Gonzalez, I like the idea of kind of piggybacking on what Dr. Reed talked about, which is a variety of experts and not necessarily just one. Like, for example, one of the issues that I saw was the contract says that 4-7 has to maintain liability insurance in the minimum amount of $3 million covering its activities and actions on the well site. I don't know if that's the standard, but it strikes me that if there's a problem, then what's to keep them from going belly up and declaring bankruptcy, and then the taxpayers are stuck with some huge EPA super dirty site, but I don't know. So if we could get people like, for example, a water person, an insurance person, and others to come in and give us opinions.
And I would like to let the board see that this is one of the maps that I was given from the city of Lubbock concerning this contract with 4-7s. On this map, there's no north on it. You don't know what you're looking at. There's no roads, sites. There's nothing on this contract that the average citizen of Lubbock can look at to see, oh, in 2 years, they're going to have a drilling rig with poisonous gas next to my street. There's nothing. This is what we were given. We expect better from the city of Lubbock. And this contract, I'm not an attorney. I'm just a languages guy from Texas Tech. But I can see all kinds of faulty things in this contract. And it does not protect, in my opinion, the citizens that are close by to these wells with the volatile organic compounds. So we need something better than this piece of paper.
Okay.
I was also going to suggest in the pre-testing to test people's health. Because, and afterwards, when they get sick, which has happened in so many places, we can correlate it. Mm-hmm. That will show proof. Because this is what they always say is, there's no proof. Okay. Well, who goes and has a physical just because somebody starts drilling wells next to you?
Okay. Quick question for council. Do we have somebody that specializes in contract law that prepared those contracts, or were those prepared by the
outside counsel?
Outside counsel. Okay.
Oil and gas prepared that.
Is that somebody that maybe we could get comment from and not have to pay him?
I'm sure he's going to cost. So I don't know if there's any budget for that.
Okay. All right.
Can you go through the contract with us?
Let me put it to you this way. I did not prepare that contract. I don't mind reading contracts, but it's somebody else's contract.
I noticed that. But is there someone that can go through this contract with us?
I don't have a problem looking at a contract like I'm telling you, but it's somebody else's contract.
Excuse me, what does somebody else's contract mean?
Somebody else wrote it, ma'am.
The city of Lubbock is signing this contract with the company that's going to do a bunch of stuff, but don't you know what it says? You can't tell us?
Ma'am, you have every right to have a copy of the contract.
Exactly. But you're a lawyer and you can't even tell it's somebody else's contract. What does that mean?
Well, it means that another attorney wrote that contract.
So he is the only one to explain it?
Well, he's the one that y'all are asking to explain what it means. The person that's a specialist in oil and gas did that contract. That's why they did it. They're specialists.
And so I would hope that we could go find, as Mr. Gonzalez says, someone independent of those contracts who is a specialist in oil and gas, who we might find a way to get them to offer us comment back without there being a cost. I mean, I think that's a possibility of finding, but we need to find an expert in that area to look, because that's what I'm saying is a $3 million liability policy sufficient, and is that the industry's norm? And it may be then that our recommendation to the council would be maybe we need to increase that, or we need to have some other guarantees in there. But again, outside my area of expertise.
But one more small question. I mean, the city of Lubbock is doing this, and the city of Lubbock is getting to get the gas. And what is the city of Lubbock going to do with the gas? Run LPNL?
Well, they just get the profit, I think. They just get paid for the revenue when the gas is sold.
Sold on the market?
Yeah.
But before the next meeting, can we find out, because these are very confusing contracts. Apparently there's 3 different contracts, and they're predated back to 1998 and 2005 and 2006. So can we get someone that can at least take us through what the heck the city did sign and how this pertains to this lease? Because maybe it's my own inadequacies here, but I couldn't figure out because these have different time periods and all kinds of things on them.
What I think you're looking at there is some exhibits.
But then
let me finish.
What it comes down to.
Let me finish.
Okay,
I think what you're looking at is some exhibits.
Right.
And I'm thinking that probably what you're looking at is there may have been some agreements on that land for something else, and I would assume that attorney is under due diligence showing the other side, look, this is already encumbered, or there's a contract here that you need to be aware of.
So that just means we can just throw that out?
Depends on what you want to. You're asking me. Depends on what you want to do. Whether you throw something out or not.
I want to know what the company that's going to do the fracking, what they're responsible for.
What should be in the contract.
So which one is the contract?
Well, if it's not an exhibit, it's a contract.
Okay,
and
so
the exhibit is part of.
Then we're just looking at the contract.
Depends what you want to do.
Okay.
Depends what you want to do.
Yeah.
You have a contract. You have exhibits that form part of the contract.
Now the exhibits actually bear on the contract?
Well, depends on, once again, what you want to do.
Here's
it's a whole contract.
Okay, here's what I want to do. I want to understand the responsibilities and the agreement with just the person that's doing the fracking.
That should be right in the contract.
Just the contract. And you can point that out.
I'm assuming that, I think I could look at a contract and say, I think that's what it is right there.
It seemed to me like the contract itself didn't amount to much at all.
Pardon me?
There wasn't much to the contract.
Okay.
I interpret that correctly.
Okay.
Well, looking at it, for example, here's a specific language about 4.7s will utilize pits for drilling mud, processed water, and other processed fluids to the extent same are consistent with the rules of the Texas Railroad Commission. So you got to know what the rules are of the commission to understand what it is that they're being obliged to.
Right.
Okay. Any other? Okay. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Gonzalez.
I don't know if you've read about the predicament that San Angelo and Palm Beach County is under. They've had fracturing in that county and around the area for a few years now. And there weren't any ordinances, there weren't any laws or regulations that would limit the use of their fresh water. And I think that we may see ourselves in a stage 3 drought situation if our water is not protected. They have had to they have to run and to make new legislation, new ordinances to protect their rights to their water. So has Arlington and Farmers Branch. Arlington is fighting with Farmers Branch because frackers in Farmers Branch are taking water out of Arlington City, Arlington area, and Arlington is fighting. Farmers Branch is fighting with other areas because they're fighting over water. Okay, now in Midland, Odessa, you cannot water your lawn. I mean, it's a desert out there. They're in a bad predicament. I can see us becoming another San Angelo, another Midland, Odessa, if we don't have ordinances and laws and regulations in place before the fracturing starts, because these little towns have had to make their own ordinances and say, frackers, you cannot come in here and drill 10,000 water wells and get all our water, suck all our water out and use it for your fracturing processes. because you are depleting our water source. It has made the grass in some areas of the hill country toxic. There have been whole herds that have died off because there is not enough water to keep the grass growing without toxins that are usually not in the grasses. That happened in Colorado, that's happened in the hill country, it's happened in the San Angelo area because of the drought. Now, if we have a drought that continues for 5 or 6 or 7 years, I read a CNN report where we could become another Dust Bowl. And if we're going to use the only precious water that we have to drink, our clean water, to frack, just for profiteering, for profit, just so that the city can profit, that is sacrificing way too much. You have to think of your children, your children's children, and the generations to come, because water is going to be something that we're all going to be struggling to provide in the city of Lubbock, just like in San Angelo, just like in Midland. It's going to be too late whenever we put an ordinance in place that protects our water rights, so that, they say, okay, they're going to use this water that they bring from the Santa Rosa. You know what? They don't use that. They can't frack with that. That water has too much salt. It's a myth that they say that they're going to bring it. They're going to bring it in from some farmer or some other person that is wanting to sell water, and that's going to deplete the aquifer. It doesn't matter where the water's coming from. It's coming from the same source. It's coming from the Ogallala. And if we don't have laws and ordinances in place, we're going to be at the same place as and you know what they're trying to, in December, because of the stage 3 drought conditions in San Angelo, they're going to be drinking water from the Hickory aquifer that is full of radium. You can't even get rid of radium in your RO system. That is water that is 100 times or more parts per billion that what is acceptable by the EPA. The EPA says that it can only be so many parts per billion. It's like 100 times more concentrated with radium and other toxic arsenic and other toxic chemicals because the water has been depleted by the drought and by the fracturing process.
Okay.
If I could just add a couple of points to that. They're talking about getting water from the Santa Rosa. That had been our 100-year water plan. In the year 2050, in our 100-year water plan, we're planning on taking water out of the aquifer for us to use. So if they get there first, what's left? What's left? And then the other thing I want to say is I know what happens to those pits. They pour that water in those pits. They wait for the water to evaporate out. Everything that's settled to the bottom of that pit, they dig it under and leave it there. It's right there under this much dirt. They dig it right into the dirt and leave it there.
So it might be good to get the High Plains Water District office to provide some comment about projections on water. Leanne?
I would also say regarding regulation that they were pretty much deregulated in 2005 with Dick Cheney and Halliburton sponsored legislation, federal legislation, the Clean Water Act and other, they've been exempted from all of that. And it is only the Railroad Commission, and basically the Railroad Commission requires disclosure of most of the chemicals, but not all, after the fact. Mm-hmm. It doesn't even require a permit to do fracturing.
Okay. Dr. Mack?
I'm going to make a suggestion, since there's a lot of misinformation, that a good website to look at, this is called FRAC, F-R-A-C, Focus, F-O-C-U-S, it's one word, fracfocus.org. This is a website put together by the EPA, along with the Department of Energy and the Groundwater Protection. And this will answer a lot of questions. There's also the ability there that people can call. There's email address, there's website. You can call and get specific information about your concerns. The other thing to look up is the EPA Safe Water Drinking Act. If you look that up on their website, again, you can ask questions. There's a lot of information, and a lot of these concerns can be addressed, and you can contact people and directly speak with them and find out if indeed what you're afraid of is real or not.
Ms. Porter?
Okay, Frac Focus is a website where operators, I believe, have to list what they did to an individual well after the fact. It doesn't protect you in any preliminary way. All they have to do is show you what they did at a specific well. Each well is listed individually, so if you want to look through 6,000 wells to find the one you're worried about, you can do that. It's after the fact.
You can contact these people directly. You don't have to look at a specific well. If you have concerns, you can contact people directly affiliated with Frac Focus and with the EPA. You can do that today or tomorrow. You can call the EPA and they'll give you information.
The damage is irreversible.
The damage is already done. It's what they did after the fact.
Actually, the way the rule reads is it says, disclosure be made to the well operator as soon as possible, but not later than 15 days following the completion of hydraulic fracking treatment on a well. So yeah, it does after the fact. After the fact.
Date may be years after the well has been drilled.
Yeah, I agree. All right. So what we're going to do is that we will have 1 week to gather together a variety of experts that we will then post that for a meeting in about 2 weeks so we can meet the 1 week deadline for open meetings as per council. And then I would certainly ask that you guys stay on the know, and we'll probably get media. I'm sure it will help to get the word out and come to that meeting. It will obviously not be here because we'll be out of here, right? So we'll have to do it down at City Hall, or we'll find a place, but it'll be an official meeting. So I imagine we use that committee room down at City Hall. But for the sake of time, we're just a little bit over. Any other closing comments? I think we've made good progress here. Appreciate you guys coming to continue to sort all this out. All right. Seeing no other comments and having gotten our business done for the day, this meeting is adjourned. Stay tuned where we meet next time. Maybe a phone booth on Broadway. Very good. All right.
Here's the problem. Asking them here to comment on a contract.
Talk about some other psychologist's work. Well, that's what I'm saying. You're not an oil and gas guy. It's a very specialized
and
field.
I don't mind showing somebody,
yeah, but
well, here's what this is, here's what this is.
But we need to find somebody that's their expertise, and then the trick is
all these lawyers charge a bunch of money.
Right.
Therein lies one. Now, in terms of looking at the contract, say, well, this is an exhibit, and I think that's due diligence as part of this. Yeah, this is what this says. I don't know what the standards are for oil and gas.
Yeah, so that's my question, is what the standards are.
No, but I'm sure those can be looked up.
Right.
But I'll tell you who else knows that any engineer that's working with I think you go two birds with one stone. Being a petroleum engineer, they've got to know the standards, to know how to advise somebody what to do and how to do it. And,
well, and I've been dating this gal that we just went to her high school reunion in Iran, Texas.
I know where that is.
Where basically they're sitting on top of the Yates oil field, the third largest producer, and all of her friends are in the oil business.
Yeah.
And so, but just to get, and again, just sit there and the disclaimer is that these are public comments made by interested citizens, and then because I'm trying to find a way to give the council some latitude of saying,
I think you're third one.